So now we are in different generations. So you have to be a strategizer. And that is the focus of entrepreneurship. You're trying to look at entrepreneurship from the angle of being a strategizer. This lady over here, many of you, and I'm assuming most of you are a very young audience, so most of you would not even have seen her or heard her name. Her name is Mary Pickford. Mary Pickford is probably one of the pioneering women entrepreneurs. And if you heard about a company called as United Artists, if you watch any of the Charlie Chaplin movies, you will see the logo United Artists. Or if you watch any James Bond movies, they're all distributed by United Artists. So almost 80 years ago, she was the entrepreneur who was a 25% shareholder in the company United Artists. The other three partners were Douglas Fairbanks, D.W. Griffith, and of course, Charlie Chaplin. So four of them started, and she was a pioneer, woman entrepreneur. And why? Why did she start it? Because the answer she said when she asked, "Are you not afraid of failing, Mary?" She said, "Failure is not the falling down, but the inability to stand up after falling down." So that's one of the greatest quotes of Mary, and that's how she lived her life. She said, "I don't want to go and seek work from others. I want to build my own career. So let's start producing." She lost money. She did not make money in all her ventures. Some of the ventures she lost money. But if you look at it, since work is the engine that powers entrepreneurship. There is a difference between invention, innovation, and discovery. But innovation is something which pioneers or which I asked my students the question, did Columbus discover America or invent America? I think he discovered it. So similarly, innovation is you're trying to, after the Second World War, the joke is, there used to be a joke going around that Americans used to spend a lot of money creating products. Japanese used to make them smaller. They used to make them smaller, tinier, and they were the pioneers of innovation. For a country which was ravaged by the atomic bomb, two cities were completely decimated. They came out after the debacle of Second World War solely because of their innovation. Companies like Sony, Toyota, Honda, Mitsubishi, Marubeni, Sumitomo, all of those companies are legendary companies in terms of the way they innovated. Whether they've fallen back in the innovation game is a debate for a later day, but that's something to keep in mind. It took me 4 slides to come to an Australian example. Sorry for that. I should have had the Australian example early, but my movie loyalty is stronger than my Australian loyalty. So that's why it took me 4 slides. And the gentleman over here in the backdrop is Rupert Murdoch. I don't know whether Rupert Murdoch considers himself to be Australian anymore, but we consider him to be a very Australian entrepreneur. Rupert is the chairman of News Corporation and of course Fox, Fox TV, Fox Network, 20th Century Fox, which is sold off now to Disney. But Rupert was a pioneer in news coverage. In the UK, they used to call him as the pioneer of tabloid journalism. Doesn't matter. He innovated. And as a new generation entrepreneur, he really changed the way news coverage happened. And if you look at the new generation, which has made an impact, all these products, I don't want to go through in detail, but all these products like biotechnology, wireless cable, pet care services, green buildings, all of them are from the new E generation. These are the E generation products which have come up solely because of innovation and how they've created a lifestyle or changed the employment perspective of building a career. Yusuf will talk about his company a little bit later, and Yusuf is definitely in the E generation. I don't know which generation I am in, but Yusuf is in the E generation, so he'll talk about it. And for many of you, you would recognize the entrepreneur in the backdrop over here. And that brings me to the example of entrepreneurship flattens the world. The world is no longer round or not connected, but it is very interconnected. And the gentleman in the back over there is Alibaba's founder, Jack Ma. And he recently announced his retirement. I don't think he's yet retired, but he's recently has announced his retirement. He was a school teacher. He tried about 8 or 9 times to get funding to start off his company. And he started off after rejections, after getting the financing. And today it's a multi-billion dollar or probably one of the largest companies from China, in China. And it flattens the world. You can see that US and Europe, the cultural and economic landscape has changed because of entrepreneurship. And it's exploding in India, China, and the former Soviet bloc. And more people are exploring the entrepreneurial mindset rather than having a mindset which is very conservative. This is a different mindset which we see over here. Janine Ellis. For those of you who walk in the malls or in the shopping centers of Australia, you cannot mistake or you cannot miss Boost juices. And Janine started Boost juices. She started, and it was a very simple idea. It was not a hugely, it did not invest, a need for, call for a lot of investment in terms of technology or manufacturing capability or equipment. It was just health food, health juices. And it worked wonders. In the past 20 years, Janine has made Boost probably one of the most recognizable brand, and it's cool to have a cup of Boost in your hand. Janine started it because it's a transformation. It's an entrepreneurial transformation from the way fruit juices were not in popularity, were not in vogue. She bought them back. And it can't be taught only in business schools, entrepreneurship. You have to really experience it, move into the stage where we look at what the opportunity is and tap into it. And that's what Janine says. She says that she's one of the greatest listeners. When anyone asks her what is the communication strength, she says her strength lies in listening. So Janine's a great example for breaking the barriers through entrepreneurship. This guy over here, the entrepreneur, is Mukesh Ambani, probably the richest Indian or richest Indian business person. His dad was the first generation entrepreneur, is now come into the second generation. Mukesh's children are the third generation now. He's got Reliance Industries. And he's the one who manages political relationships extremely well. And there is a rumor that he has significant impact on the public policy, and because of his clout as a businessman, and that is a big factor. If you are a successful entrepreneur who's 10,000, 20,000 people work for your company, then you have the economy, the GDP, the employment, all of them linked to your organization. So public policy will be shaped by you, and entrepreneurship can make an impact with that, and government listens to that point. Li Ka-sheng, the background over there, is the one who talks about social mobility. He comes from a country, Hong Kong. Now it's a special administrative region. It's no longer a different country. Till 1990, it was part of the British Empire, and then it became, now it's a part of China. China manages it. It's a special administrative region of China. Li Ka-sheng is one of the pioneering entrepreneurs of Hong Kong. He has a company called Hutchinson Wampoa, Hutchinson Holdings, into telecommunications, into real estate. And he was the one who said entrepreneurship, and by building business, we will have economic and social mobility. Members of the society can move up one stage to the other. If they build a business, their self-esteem, self-confidence will build up, and then they will start providing employment to others. That also ensures that the society and economy as a whole is growing. And it's not about religion, gender, skin color, or social class. It's all about which opportunity we are tapping in and building on that opportunity. And Li Ka-sheng was an exemplar of that. My favorite, another favorite, some of you might recognize him, some of you might not, Peter Jackson. This is the guy who put New Zealand on the entrepreneurial map. There were a lot of entrepreneurs before that coming from New Zealand, but no one at a scale and magnitude of what Peter Jackson did. He created something called as the Middle Earth, and New Zealand was the Middle Earth. New Zealand Airlines were using his campaigning, his movies, the guy who created Lord of the Rings and Hobbit. Why? The biggest risk taker. Before Peter Jackson made this, 10 other movie companies passed on the opportunity to translate or to adapt the book of J.R. Tolkien. He said, I will do it. It's a challenge. I will do it. And for him, the biggest personal satisfaction comes not from making a successful movie, but by making New Zealand the movie capital of this part of the world. He built, because of Lord of the Rings, so much infrastructure, so much development took place in New Zealand that now today James Cameron has shifted his base from Hollywood and lives in New Zealand because he thinks that's got wonderful facilities. And Peter Jackson always says that the love of work is invigorating, energizing, and meaningful. And that's what he enjoyed. He enjoyed by setting up the studio and the system for a Lord of the Rings. Carlos Slim. So most of you might be in your 20s, or many of you might be young, definitely much younger than me. So I thought I'll use Carlos Slim is a backdrop Mexican entrepreneur. He's got a group so who's a telecommunications giant. He started his business venture at the age of 25. Bill Gates and Paul Allen started their Microsoft company in their early 20s. Michael Dell started Dell Computers in his early 20s. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak started Apple Computers in their early 20s. Edward Land of Polaroid and Phil Knight of Nike, both of them started their companies in early 20s. So there is no right age or right time to start a company. You can start when you're in your 20s, or if you're Colonel Sanders, you can start if you're in your 65, or if you're Clint Eastwood, you can still make movies at the age of 90. So there's no age is not a bar. Please don't say that I'm too young or too old or not ready. You are never ready for entrepreneurship. You just plunge into it and start swimming. Philanthropy is an important part of entrepreneurship. Uh, when I started teaching entrepreneurship 22 years ago, hardly 1% of my students used to talk about social entrepreneurship. Today, in every class of entrepreneurship I teach, 30% of students want to become social entrepreneurs. 30%. It's not an exaggeration. And Sir Richard Branson, as a backdrop over here, is a great example. He made himself as the brand of Virgin. He's the brand ambassador. And for him, entrepreneurship is a means and ways to have fun and also to give back to the community. The impact is made on UK. The impact is made on the UK entrepreneurial scene. And probably he was the first American style entrepreneur operating in UK, because mixing philanthropy and entrepreneurship. And that's a great example over there. Of course, most of us know Oprah. Oprah is probably if you look at the top 5 women entrepreneurs in the world, Oprah will be in every list. Whether she'll be in the top 3 or top 5, but she will be in that list. And it's a revolution, the entrepreneurial revolution, which Oprah, not only because she belongs to one minority or a different community, that is beyond the point. The fact that she's shaped up and shaken up the entertainment industry, and it's showcases, and she always propagates, Oprah always says that entrepreneurship is taught in so many colleges and schools now. When we were growing up, we did not have that option. In fact, when I did my MBA, I did not even have a course called entrepreneurship in my MBA. When I started teaching, I had one 6-unit course called as business plan, which I taught in MBA. Today, we have degrees, post-graduation, master's programs in entrepreneurship. It's changed. The revolution has come in, and it's very clear. And of course, I cannot do a presentation to this age group of participants without having this guy's photo. Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook. And apparently, if I am using Facebook, I'm classified as old. My daughter says that she never goes onto Facebook because it's for old people. It took me a lifetime to understand social media. Now I have to start understanding new versions of social media. But that's what he's done. That's what Zuckerberg has done. At a very young age, he's bought in equity creation, making young billionaires, 20-year-old billionaires, and all so-called unicorn companies. It's all job creation. Whether it's a Google or a Facebook or an Instagram or a Snapchat or a WhatsApp, they're all younger organizations which have changed the perspective of entrepreneurship. Over 95% of the nation's wealth has been created since 1980. Every nation's wealth, a direct result of the entrepreneurial revolution. If you look at the wealth, every country in the world has it. Today, in the past 40 years, that wealth has been created. And that's because of the equity creation, new age, which we see. Building an entrepreneurial society. The example of the lady over here is Kiran Mazumdar Shaw. She is a chairperson of a company called as Biocon. She studied in University of Ballarat, Melbourne University and Ballarat, and then went back to India and started a Biocon company. Became very successful, and very strong into social entrepreneurship and philanthropy. And she says, for building an entrepreneurial society, the economic mobility and social mobility increases, and the poor get richer because we have access to more opportunities. And lastly, no presentation on entrepreneurship will complete without having this guy's photo, Steve Jobs. And if you look at it, Apple changed the world we think. The way in which we think, the world's thinking has changed by Apple. If you look at an ad by Apple in 1984, when they launched Apple computers, the way they took on IBM, it's a clear case of showcasing how you need to take on the big guys and challenge the status quo. And there's no one better than Steve Jobs to exemplify that. Entrepreneurs, to conclude, are job givers. Today, 70% of youngsters do not want to work in 9-to-5 jobs. 9-to-5 jobs are boring. They want to work in times which are, and I learned something in the past 24 months, asynchronous learning. I didn't know. I thought in classroom the learning is happening, but today students want to have asynchronous learning. That is, they don't want to be in front of the lecturer and learn. They want to learn at their own time. And entrepreneurship has opened that opportunity. Entrepreneurship is something which is creating opportunities. If you are not a risk taker, try to be an entrepreneur within an organization itself. Try to be entrepreneurial within an organization. And the world is an oyster. Go and grab the opportunities. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation. Over to you, Yusuf.
Thank you. Thanks, Rajiv. Wow, that was very eye-opening, inspirational, to say the least. Great examples, obviously. Probably not going to cap that in terms of experience. I thank everyone for being here. As I guess Alex given my background, I'll introduce a little bit about myself and I'll talk about my journey up to date. So in the scheme of things, my journey is very much a young one. So it's been just under a year that, I've been an entrepreneur, I guess, sort of a full-time. So I'll speak about the journey and what got me here. So first thing first, we often as students, graduates, young professionals are sort of defined by a title or defined by a job, defined by an industry, defined by a company. But what we often miss is that you're really defined by your skills. That is the skills that you can take from one job to another, from one business to another, from one team to another, the transferable skills. So to demonstrate that, think about, for example, the famous politicians or celebrities. Obviously, a lot of examples. I'll mention sort of two examples. The Rock is he's not exactly an entrepreneur, but he's very famous wrestler, bodybuilding, an icon, right? And from building that brand and the skills that he got about dealing with people, putting an act, which, as you know, most of wrestling is, he became an actor and he became one of the most influential people in the States and globally. Similarly speaking, in the fitness industry, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he started as bodybuilder, giving that his skills in management, motivation, that is getting what he wants, influencing people, he ended up in politics. Donald Trump, right? Like him or hate him, he's another example of how you can transfer your skills. So he's probably the only president in the US history that doesn't come from a political or military background, but he used the skills of, his persona, his image, his branding. Obviously, there are a lot of social and political factors involved, but I want to focus more about transferable skills. So if I relate that to my journey personally, so I started engineering 2.5 years. So full-time civil engineering, really technical. Didn't really enjoy what I do, sort of transferred to business, majored in accounting. So still had some skills from engineering, basically, dealing with data, statistics. Ended up in accounting, did that for 2 years, and then ended up more in management consulting, so advisory. So thinking about the skills, it's more about what I didn't realize in the process when I first graduated, got a graduate job or started working, is I was accumulating skills per job, per position. So when I was a management consultant or was an accountant, I was getting attention to detail. I was getting sort of business writing, skills like networking, which are very important. So take a moment to think about what transferable skills you have that can transfer to a business, a venture, a company, or any product you end up establishing, whether it's a product or a service. So in the journey of GradShip, what we do in GradShip, I work with graduates basically to focus more about your skills, what you can take from your degree, from your network, from your previous roles, whether it's casual, hospitality, retail, because all of these skills end up making basically who you are and what ventures you can tap into. So in my case, when I sort of quit full-time job and started this journey, there's definitely that psychological factor that, what if it doesn't work out? It's a risk taking. But you have to keep reminding yourself that if you start something and it doesn't work out, you would have learned a lot more skills than before starting it, first of all. Second of all, you can always go back to a certain position or certain role because you do have that experience. So in your case, if you have an engineering degree and you want to try something, a product on the side, you'll always have that engineering degree and those skills related to it. So you can always get a full-time employment, for example. So that, I guess, alienates that sort of hesitancy in terms of risk-taking. I'm not suggesting that, all of you should quit jobs and start a venture, but I'm saying there's a lot of psychological barrier, especially for younger people like myself, before starting their ventures. And they're not exactly sure about how to approach this. So think about it as you're a collective of skills that you have. You can work on your skills. And on that as well, I'll talk about, I guess, the three most important things that I found in my sort of young journey that are important to any entrepreneur or any sort of, if you want to become a business owner or any idea you want to project. So first thing, you have to find basically a problem that you're solving. What is it, the problem that you're solving? What's the service you're providing? Is it solving someone's problem? Or in some cases, a product that sort of gives a feeling, like a Gucci belt is not really a problem for anyone. They don't have it built. It's more, you're selling the feeling, you're selling the brand. So think about what is it that you're conveying to the consumer in terms of problem. That would be number one. Number two is learn how to sell. So in this age, learn digital marketing. A lot of you, if not all of you, are on Facebook or Instagram. Learn how this works. The power of digital marketing and selling. If you can't sell your idea, you might have the best product in the world. You sell the best cakes. You make the best caps or tops or whatever it is that you're making. If no one knows about it, you basically don't have a business. So if you can't sell and make revenue, you cannot basically convey your message and people cannot know about you. So make sure you learn those skills of selling, whether it's through books, courses, YouTube videos. There is a ton of material. That's one problem that we definitely don't have in this generation, the lack of information. We have information more than any generation in history, more than our parents, grandparents, not only through education, formal education, universities. Literally, you can Google any question and you can get instant answers that are related exactly to your question. That's a great power that really underestimate because we're living in it. But if you ask your parents or those who didn't live it, you really understand how powerful the devices we have right now in terms of technology. So second is learn about selling, learn about digital marketing, learn about in-person networking skills, how to project yourself, how to sell your idea. You have to be sold in your ideas, right? So convince yourself of a product, do a bit of verification in the market, and then learn how to sell that. That would be my second one. The third one, and this is important for entrepreneurs, professionals, students, graduates, whatever you are, networking. It's not a secret. 70%, according to Business Insider, of all jobs are done through referrals for someone right? That's for jobs. For entrepreneurs, now, if you know an accountant, you can just ask them certain questions. A lawyer, you can make the contracts. If you know someone who can sell, you can hire a salesperson. Networking, right? So your network currently, and I tell this to students, in the case, for example, of LinkedIn, a lot of professionals start on LinkedIn and they say, oh, I don't know a lot of people. No, you actually know a lot more people than you think. If you think about your networks, whether it's socially, in your geography, your family friends, your ex-colleagues, your groups, your sport groups, people you haven't spoken to in years, they're all part of your network. Now, the degree to which you know them, depends on how, I guess, you've kept in contact with them, but this is part of your influence and your network. So the more you grow your network in terms of quantity and quality, the more you'll be able to do as an entrepreneur, and the more you're willing to verify your ideas earlier on in the process. That way you can scale at a larger scale, much larger scale than you start. So I think those are three things to recap from my experience. Obviously, each entrepreneur and each business owner has a different experience. But to recap, before we get to the questions, first thing first, you want to know what your product is solving. Is it a feeling? Is it a problem? Second, learn about selling, digital marketing, and these are very important. And third, network. As I say, your network is your net wealth. So make sure that you do cap on that. And with that, I'll conclude and I'll hand it to Alex to start a Q&A.
Thank you so much, Yusuf, and thank you, Rajiv. Two excellent presentations, varying kind of perspectives that we're getting there, really big scale, and then we're going smaller scale, kind of the ways that you could approach entrepreneurship as an international student, and some really inspiring figures to really kind of set your sights on. So we're getting a heap of questions coming through in the Q&A, so I'll just pick a couple and we'll get a conversation going. So someone's just asked, can they start a startup in Australia as an international student? Is it legal? And the answer to that is yes. But Rajiv, you're nodding away. Did you want to give a little bit more information on that?
Absolutely. It is. Every country wants your money. So it's not that you can start a business and then no one has your and in fact, the good point is you can invest or show investment of $500,000 in what to be able to government. The government of Australia encourages people to invest our entrepreneurial sectors, especially category of business for more businesses. So if you bring in that money, but if you're saying we don't access one want to start a business, yes, you can start. You can join with other people over here or raise someone, and then the visa process can be parallel, but the concept over here is whether they have an idea which attracts funding. So if you have an idea which is attracts funding, then investors will be in fact, I mentored a couple of students.
Sorry, Rajiv. We're just having some issues with your microphone. So you might want to, we're just having some issues with the microphone. There's a little bit of feedback there, so we might need to fix that. Okay. How do you want to give that another go? Sorry.
So
it's still happening. We might need to fix that. In the meantime, maybe we'll move on to another question and we'll jump back to that one once we've fixed that up. Sorry about that, Rajiv. So we'll go to another question here. This one's from Benjamin Chin, and I'll direct this to you, Yusuf. What advice would you give to a graduate looking to join the workforce with the slight disadvantage of not being a permanent resident or citizen in the country that they're intending to work in?
Good one. That's a really good question. That's very much related to the audience. Thanks for that, Benjamin. I would advise two things. First of all, as an international student, you have to know that the work that you're doing while you're studying, whether in hospitality or retail, does count to your work experience, and you should put it on your resume and sell yourself with those transferable skills. So just because you don't have professional or experience in your field in Australia doesn't mean that you don't have Australian experience. That's the first thing. The second thing, also, a lot of international students are only narrowing the scope of search to international companies or big companies, while the reality is 98%, and I'm not making this up, this is Australian government stat, 98% of Australia, number of businesses, are small businesses. That is, if you're only looking for larger employers and companies you know about, you're only looking at 2% of the market. So yes, it takes a bit more research to find these companies, but working for a smaller or medium-sized business can really make a difference to your employability. And usually, because not many applicants and many students seek those opportunities, they are less competitive, and therefore you have a higher chance. You can go, in my case, I was Googling sort of human resources companies, Melbourne, management consulting, Sydney, IT data companies, Brisbane, for example. Simple Google search, it's not going to give you everything, but I'll give you some leads to some list about these companies and how to find them. So make sure you approach these before you think sort of your opportunities are limited, because there's a wide range of market that you can apply for as an international student.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Yusuf. So another question here from Anonymous. It is, how can international students connect with other entrepreneurs if they're new to Australia? Are there specific forums that they can be seeking? Are there groups or associations that people can get involved with? I'll pass that over to you, Yusuf, and then we'll test out the microphone, Rajiv.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in my experience, this is going to sound a bit unorthodox, but Instagram has a lot of people who basically are doing in the entrepreneurship space, or Facebook groups. So if you see someone that you like their content, whether they're doing in a product or service market, you do want to reach out to them and you do want to connect with them. So that's been one of the easiest things for me to connect. That's one thing. LinkedIn is a huge platform. I'm a big advocate for LinkedIn. You know, whether you have 300 or 500 or 5,000 connections, the opportunities to link with like-minded people, entrepreneurs on LinkedIn, you can filter by title, by industry. So they would be my biggest two platforms, Facebook groups, Instagram, and LinkedIn as online. I'm speaking obviously from Victoria. We have a lockdown where we can't physically go, and most of Australia is the same. So obviously next year, there are a lot of events. Be involved on campus or in your workplace, but I would say these are your go-to in any time. You can always contact with people there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Yusuf. And we are huge fans of LinkedIn over here. So to all of our attendees, make sure that you're connecting. You can connect with our panelists today. Feel free to connect with Insider Guides, PTE Academic as well. That's a really good kind of foundational place to start your virtual networking, especially if you're offshore at the moment and you haven't been able to enter Australia. Or as Yusuf just said, under circumstances, if you can't leave the house at the moment, LinkedIn and that idea of YouTube and stuff is a really good place to get you started. So we've had quite a few questions coming in about funding, essentially, as an entrepreneur. So I might pass this one over to you, Rajiv. Just one.
Alex, can you hear my mic? Is it
Perfect.
better now?
You're back.
Yeah, that's good. So as you suggested, I went out and came in again.
No, that's working fine.
Yes.
So we'll just do this finance question, and then I might actually jump back to that original question that we had for you, Rajiv. But in this one, so we've had a question here from Michael, who said he's really passionate about entrepreneurship and he has a business idea that will help in mitigating problems of unemployment in the hospitality industry within his home country. But getting funding and mentorship is a challenge. As an immigrant in Australia, he can't access seed capital. How can he access different mentorship programs or funding?
Okay. What's the name of the student, Alex?
Michael.
Okay. Michael, for every university or every educational institution has a link to an incubator or an accelerator, whether it's in Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, Brisbane, everywhere. All the educational institutions I know, they have a link to an incubator or an accelerator. Those incubators and accelerators provide you an opportunity to have mentors. And I mentor on two of those incubators and accelerators, and we do it absolutely free of cost. So all you need to do is go and register yourself over there so that you get access to the mentoring. And most of the time, I would say 8 out of the 10 business ideas are not worthy of receiving funding. Mm-hmm. So the entrepreneur or the startup entrepreneur might think his or her idea is very good, but in reality, from an investor perspective, it might not be that good. But the mentors will sort it out for you. Mm-hmm. So I don't know which city or where you plan to study or come over, but whichever university you are going to, or whichever educational institution or whichever program you're going to pursue, that institution has a tie-up with an incubator or accelerator. That is not restricted to international students. In fact, we have lots of international students who work in these programs and get mentored. So please access those resources.
Excellent. Thank you, Rajiv. So we will jump back to the original question that we had when we were having the microphone issues, which is, can an international student start a startup in Australia? So you just want to take away that one?
Absolutely, yes. I'll give you an example of anyone who asked that question. When I moved into this country in 1997, I was an international student. It took me exactly 8 minutes to register my company. I timed it. I timed it. It took me exactly 8 minutes to register my company. And I went in with, and I came out with my registration, with my everything. I can start all the infrastructure on paper, which I need to start my business. Yusuf agrees with that.
Yeah,
Back home in
I
my
think it's more
country,
efficient now. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So sometimes in my back home, when I was growing up, it used to take me days and days together to register a company. Here it's very streamlined. In fact, now if you want to have an Australian business number, ABN, it takes you 5 minutes online and you get your ABN and you're ready to do the trading and business. So there are two parts of it. As an international student, you can start a business. And of course, if you want to use your business as a conduit to get a permanent residency, there are some conditions. There is an entrepreneur visa, there is an investment visa, which you can pursue that. And of course, the amounts vary and depends on how much amount you're investing and what is the number of people you're employing. Those will vary. Yes, Barbara, yes, 8 minutes. Yes, yeah, you won't believe it. It took me 8 minutes, and out of which 3 minutes I was waiting for my stamp to be prepared. They were preparing a stamp which had to be prepared, and I prepared it also. In 3 minutes, I had a stamp. So yeah, so it is very easy to start a business, but it's also very easy to lose out on the business or close down, because there are so many companies here which they start off a business thinking that they have a great idea, but at the end of the day, survival of the fittest. So if your idea is good, your visa status is not a restriction. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rajiv. So a question here for Yusuf. There's actually a couple kind of basically on the same thing, which is most employers need someone who has work experience, but it's really hard to get that first step. How should they prepare? So how should an international student be approaching getting their foot in the door of employment?
That's a good question, actually, and that's a struggle for. I didn't have experience when I graduated, and I can definitely relate. I would say two things again. First is try to avoid this situation. Obviously, if you graduated already, you're already there. But during your studies, you can do a whole lot of experience, retail, hospitality, volunteering, getting involved on campus. Even if you don't, and you do graduate and you don't have any experience and you're not sure where to start, before you just start applying for a new job, think strategically, what is it that you want to do? Maybe, I guess, an experience directly in the role is not, needed yet. It's more about, your experience if you've done an internship. So a lot of companies, and I mean thousands of companies, if you approach them for an internship, whether obviously mostly unpaid, but there are those who pay for those, for a smaller pay for a shorter time, would be happy to take you as an intern. So internship is a really good way to get experience, exposure before you secure that full-time position. And just on that, I saw a question about similar to that, what should I put in my resume sort of for the role. I'll just make a general comment about resumes, having done many, especially for international students. Don't include your life story in the resume, only include what's relevant for the role. So if you just graduated and you only have one role, don't have a resume of 4 pages that are related to extracurricular activities and things that are not directly related to the role. If you have all these, yes, if you're a professional with 5 years experience, by all means, you can have up to 3 pages, that's fine. But more often than not, as a student and graduate, keep your resume really short, relevant, readable. So make it 1 to 2 pages max, no longer than that. That way, not only the software reads it better, even the person, when they see that resume, if I see one resume of 1 page and one of 3 pages, regardless of which is relevant, just an easier read for me. So if you can put everything that's relevant in 1 page or 2 pages, then do it. So that would be my advice to resumes and work experience.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Yusuf. And was there anything that you wanted to add to that, Rajiv, from your perspective when it comes to that idea of getting your foot in the door, getting started in the workforce?
Good point, Yusuf. And I always tell my students there's a difference between a resume and a eulogy.
That's a good one.
Someone else has to read out your eulogy. Resume is what you're reading out yourself, preparing yourself. So don't try to blow your trumpet too much. Just try to be very clear and focused to the role you're applying. And internship is a fantastic idea. Yusuf has suggested. Some of you might be in regional towns or might be getting into regional education institutions where there is not too much opportunity for internship. Don't let that bog you down. There are lots of online opportunities nowadays, including writing blog posts or being a deputy editor, because we are a digital world. And so we have a lot of opportunities to pursue. Just because you're in a smaller town or a smaller city, which does not have large organizations to offer internship, don't get deterred. Internship is you can even go and work in the city council.
Yeah,
that's an internship. So every town or city will have a city council. Just go and work there and say that you will be. In '97, when I moved to this country, I was given a research assistant scholarship or a research assistant job. 20 hours per week I can work, provided the professors give me work. So every Friday, I used to go and knock on everyone's doors and say, do you want some photocopying done? Do you want some copying done? Because that's the only way I can get money. If the professor says no photocopying, that means I'm not getting any money. So you have to be creative to find a way to, and there are lots of opportunities nowadays, which has really flattened it. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
And to that, I just add, think about how if you don't have experience and you're in that position, think about how can you upskill to get the job. So there are thousands of courses you can do: Udemy, Coursera, Google, YouTube videos, LinkedIn Learning, thousands of courses very relevant to what you do. Employers expect you to know this skill. You can take the skill and add it to your credentials. So that could be a way to overcome that sort of, experience gap. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much to you both. So an interesting question here from Manvir, who said, essentially, what are some examples of entrepreneurship in Australia? Do you guys have any particular examples of businesses that you know that have started up, any startup companies? Obviously, we've got GradShip here, but are there any other companies that we can kind of offer as like Aussie homegrown examples for the audience today?
Yusuf, you want to go first, or?
Sure. I mean, I know obviously the ones that are based in Melbourne. So a couple of digital agencies, Radian Agency, for example, marketing, small team, 2 graduates just started their own thing. LGT Digital Agency, that's another agency that's fairly successful. One person, dropped out of uni, started it. They're both based in Melbourne, just as examples. These are just the ones I personally know. There are thousands of stories you're only going to hear in a couple of months or a couple of years when they become big. So it's really hard to look at, I guess, have a full list. But that's the importance of networking, because I know these individuals, I happen to know their success story.
Yes, thanks, Yusuf. And there are companies like Life Whisperer, Thank You, Judo Bank, Ship It. All these companies, they're all startups. They all started up, and when they started up, they started in incubators and accelerators. And if you look at the story of a company called Thank You, which is a social enterprise, entrepreneurial example, water bottles, making water bottles, and Daniel Flynn, the founder's vision is to help eradicate poverty across the world. So Thank You is a great example. And the startup culture over here in Australia has changed radically in the past 20 years. And we are almost on par in picking up and working like an American setup. Because, of course, in the US, the startup culture is far more pronounced, but here it's getting there. Every university, every college, every educational institution is encouraging startups. And we have the culture of startups where students themselves don't want to go and seek a job anymore. They want to try something startup. So that culture has changed. Okay.
Yep, and I just put a list. I read a recent LinkedIn, which is why LinkedIn is important, about top 10 startups, Australian companies. So yeah, if you're involved in that scene, you'll know more about it. So I just put a link for 10 from, and Judo Bank was one of them, one of the big startups in Australia.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing that resource, Yusuf. So if anyone was interested, we've popped that in the chat there and you can refer back to that. So I have a question here. You guys might not be able to answer this, but let's give it a go anyways. So one of our attendees has asked, what are the side hustle jobs or businesses that international students can do in Australia to earn extra money, which doesn't count towards their Australian working hours, which is capped at 40 hours per fortnight? Do you know anything about that process? And if so, what are those ideas of side hustles, or as we would call it in Australia, kind of the gig economy that international students can get involved with?
Even the gig economy, Alex, you have to mention it to the tax office.
Well, that's good. Good to know. So there you go. Whoever asked that question.
Yes. So even the gig and the 20-hour restriction is something which I would strongly encourage not to violate that, because for a short-term gain, you're ending up in long-term pain. Because if the visa immigration office knows that you violated the 20-hour limit, the chances of getting a permanent visa are drastically reduced. So don't violate that. And I will segue into Alex's question in a different way to try to understand how you can make those 20 hours count. Get into research. Research, you can't count 20 hours. You can work literally full time and you are producing work and you can get paid for it. And of course, officially, it's only still 20 hours work, but no one is counting how many hours you took to write a paper. It's up to you. And you get money out of it. And also you are developing your skills and you are networking with like-minded people. And of course, gig economies like Uber Eats or Uber driving and all, those are okay if you want to pursue as additional sources of income. But as a long-term career option, that's for you to make a call on that.
Thanks. And on that note, on sort of a side hustle, really make sure you know your numbers when you have an ABN, because unlike a tax file number, when you work for an employer and the tax is deducted, ABN, you are responsible for paying your own taxes at the end of the financial year. So really have to know if you're an ABN, like Uber drivers are, for example, know how much tax you are required to pay in the financial year, just so you don't end up with a big tax bill. And I know many international students especially end up in that situation just because they didn't know that's the difference. So make sure you know the difference between paying your taxes as a business owner with an ABN or a tax file number, which already deducted by the employer.
Excellent, thank you. Really great tips from you both there. And I know that's a question that we get a lot through Insider Guides. So thank you for clarifying that for our attendees today. We had a question here from Animesh who said, what are the challenges an international student will face compared to a local resident in the case of starting a company? Obviously, there are some hurdles that they'll need to overcome. What could they be doing to kind of, mediate that and make it easier for them?
That's a good question, Alex, and that's a good question. Avinash, who asked it? Yeah. Yes, okay. That's a good question, because one of the disadvantages, I won't call it as a disadvantage, but I'm classifying it as a disadvantage, is a local student might have his or her high school network or educational institution network. They went to XYZ school, so they know their seniors, they know their juniors, they know their parents, they know their alumni from that school, which as an international student, you might not have that advantage. So how do you overcome that? Network within your area. You choose which area you're going to pursue your entrepreneurial ambitions. And within that area, there are so many networking opportunities. In fact, every city I know of has at least one networking event every day nowadays. So just get into those networking, and you might try a few of them. After the first meeting, you might think, oh, it's too boring, or you might say it's a great opportunity, let me build on it. So you have to network, because you are not getting it on a platter. You don't have your old boys network or old alumni network or school network or college network to fall back on. So you have to build that network. That's my suggestion I will give. That's one disadvantage you'll have.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. I was going to say something very similar. I'll add to that. As an international student, yes, you do have that disadvantage of not having that, high school and early network, but you also have the advantage of international students like you, right? So you all can relate to each other. It's much easier for you to connect with fellow international students. So make sure you stick to these people, network with them, whether they're in your course, in your entrepreneurship journey. It's a lot easier for you to establish quality networks being an international student than being a local student with international students. So don't forget that you actually have that community, whether it's from the same country and community, or other international students who are going through the same experience in Australia. So both are good ways to find networking opportunities.
Excellent. Thank you so much to you both. And again, that idea of networking opportunities, we've discussed this. We actually have a really good session later on today in regards to that idea of networking and communication and interviews and that sort of stuff. So we'll pop a link to that in the chat as well, if that is something that you're interested in getting involved with. And if you just want to network for fun with other international students and local Aussies, again, there's the quiz last thing today. So that is another really excellent way to, start increasing that networking circle. It doesn't always need to be professional. It doesn't need to always be formal and serious. It can just be a bit of fun, and you never know what kind of opportunities will open up. We've had a really interesting question come through here from Marihan, who said, as an international student, being an entrepreneur seems like a really big risk, especially in the current COVID-19 crisis. How would you motivate yourself to take that risk?
So I'll speak first to this. I'll have to say I was an international student, but I feel like the psychological barrier is the same, regardless if you're a local or international student. You motivate yourself by knowing what your skills are going into it. So going into it, you don't have to quit all of your jobs. If you have a job, stay at it. Think about entrepreneurship. It's not sort of a one-way street. If this idea doesn't work, then that's over. It's more about, you can have different ideas. You can try them out. You can have a bit of testing. And even if you go all in, it doesn't work, the skills that you have will establish you to start another opportunity or another employment, or you could go back to your old job. So think about it. It's not one size fits all. There are many opportunities that you can take. Overcoming that psychological barrier, just remember that you do have the current skills that you have before going into the venture. After the venture, if anything, you'll have more skills, not less, because you have more experiences that you accumulated. So that's how I thought about it before, I guess, starting GradShip for myself. And I'm sure Dr. Rajiv will have a bit more to say.
Yeah, Yusuf, that's a good point. And I would say, you don't need to really worry about whether it's a risk you're taking, because if you have a job, first take the job, I would say. But many a time we might not be lucky enough to have a job because the market is so competitive. Or if you get into an organization, as I said in my last slide, be an entrepreneur. You convince the organization to believe in your idea, and if the organization is funding and supporting you, you can still be an entrepreneur but with someone else's money, and that's a great situation to be in. And I have known so many people who have gone into an organization, presented their idea, the organization believed in their idea and invested in their idea. That's a good way. You can be an entrepreneur within an organization which is an entrepreneur. But of course, if you have a very good good cushiony job, giving it up is a risk. But if you don't have anything to lose, definitely entrepreneurship is better than that. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you to you both again. So I have another question here in regards to that idea of the 40 working hours per fortnight. And they've asked whether this is correct. And yes, again, you can check your visa restrictions on the Department of Home Affairs. We'd recommend you doing that. But generally for a student visa to Australia, it is capped at 40 hours per fortnight working. And they've said, is it possible to run a business in Australia by only doing 40 hours of work a fortnight?
Absolutely, yes. Because you are not running, you're running the business only for 40 hours. But rest of the time, someone else is working for you, or you are working only for 40 hours. Rest of the time, you are doing the books or doing something which you're not showing as work. Mm-hmm. And if you are a startup entrepreneur, you won't have money to pay your salary for the first few months. So you can say that you're working for 0 hours also because there's no salary coming in. But yeah, jokes apart, you can work you can start a business, and within 20 hours you can count only the hours which you are really counting towards earning money or showcasing it to the ATO, saying that this is where I'm getting the money. Rest of it it's unpaid work, and you are not counting it as any work. So it does not exceed the 20 hours limit.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Joseph?
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, I was going to say the same, nothing to add there. Yeah.
Perfect. And so we'll go with one last question here to wrap up today. Again, thank you so much to our audience. We've had so many interesting questions. We're really sorry if we didn't manage to get to yours. So final one here, and it's an interesting one. I'm going to try and rephrase it a little bit. But they've essentially said, can you legally, as an international student with a bit of experience, create learning internships for your peers? The purpose would be to positively help others gain experience and mentor them on non-commercial projects because they can't find any other positions. So I think it's the idea of maybe as an international student, if you don't officially have, a business and you don't have your ABN, but you want to be able to support your peers in giving them work experience. Is this a viable option?
Yes, it is a viable option if you have knowledge about the Australian market. But if you're just generally giving them advice about how to run a business, then that's fine. But otherwise, if you don't have knowledge about the Australian market and you're trying to advise them to get into the Australian market, it's a bit of a slippery surface, because you've not experienced the Australian market and you are not qualified enough to advise about the Australian market. So I would say proceed with caution over there in that area. Yep.
Yeah. I was gonna say something very similar, but I would say also to this is, you know, you don't have to think about it business and employees and internships. Think about it transferable skills. So just like you would add your volunteering experience when you're applying to an employer because it's related, you've done projects, whether it's community work, on-campus engagements, events coordinating, you could do the exact same thing with other international students. So if you have transferable skills that you can employ other people in, just like an events coordinator, or you have an initiative, or, you know, just your involvement in the community, this is all transferable skills that gives them exact same skills as an employment and could be very relevant to what they're studying, and they can add it to your resume and LinkedIn. So make sure you think about it holistically, not just in this, you know, scope of like business and payments and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you to you both again.
Thank you.
So we'll wrap it up there. An enormous thank you to all of our attendees today. This has been one of our most popular sessions of Australia X, and we're so happy to have you all here and getting involved. We did pick a winner of the $50 Visa gift card, so thank you to everyone for engaging and being a part of this. And an enormous thank you to you, Yusuf, and to you, Rajiv, for all your time and all your work in putting this together. It's been so wonderful working with you both.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Raf, and thank you, Yusuf, for giving the opportunity. It was great connecting with the student. I can already see that I've got a couple of LinkedIn requests.
Oh, perfect. There you go, everyone. Get networking. You know, you can connect with Rajiv and Yusuf both on LinkedIn. We've provided links to GradShip in there as well if you want to get involved with that too.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank
Rajiv. Thanks.
Thank you, Yusuf.
Brilliant. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Alex.
No worries.
Thank
and we'll see you at the next session. Bye, everyone.